A hiker tripped over metal buried in an old fire pit. Beneath it, a tent, bones, and a melted ID. Chase Greer, youth mentor. The tent was zipped shut from the outside, but what they uncovered next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. First, let's go back. The forest at Devil's Ridge hadn't changed in 17 years, but everything else had. The pines still stood like sentinels, tall and grim, their bark darkened by decades of rain and silence. Wind still hissed through their limbs like breath through clenched teeth. But where once laughter had echoed from eager young voices chasing summer rites of passage, only the brittle snap of dry twigs remained. The forest had grown stiller, heavier, like it was holding something beneath the soil that dared not rise. In 2008, the Eden Valley Youth Club was a beloved local tradition. Parents sent their kids there for discipline, friendships, and the illusion of safety. Alyssa was the class president. Bethany was planning to study nursing. Tyrell had just won a state track scholarship. Maddie was quiet but brilliant. She had a sketchbook no one was allowed to see. And Chase, barely out of high school himself, was the confident, charming counselor who seemed too old for his role and too eager to prove something no one asked of him. They were last seen heading up the southern trail near dusk, backpacks swinging, lanterns bobbing like fireflies as they crested the ridge. Locals remembered the sun was slow to set that evening, hanging low and red like it didn't want to go down. Then came the night, and with it, nothing. Search teams combed every inch of forest. Aerial drones, scent-tracking hounds, divers in the nearby reservoir. Even cadaver dogs failed to react. No signs of struggle, no scraps of clothing, no human trace. The only hint, a trail of boot prints that led into a grove thick with spruce, then vanished mid-step, as if the earth had swallowed them whole. Investigators gave up quietly. Officially, it was an unresolved disappearance under suspicious conditions. Unofficially, it was a failure. And yet, for the families left behind, there was never silence, only an ache sharpened by unanswered questions. Karen Kane, already widowed, played Maddie's final voicemail every night for weeks, until the file corrupted. Her service provider blamed a network update. She never believed it. The town changed. Camp closed. The trail overgrew. Children were warned to stay away from the woods, not because of what they knew, but because of what they feared. Some claimed to hear things out there, low growls at midnight, distant weeping, sometimes laughter, but no one dared to confirm it. And so the legend grew, until, one day, a woman caught her boot on something solid beneath the blackened fire pit. Not a stone, not a root, a handle, metal, burned, and beneath it, the dead had been waiting. The revelation struck like a thunderclap through Eden Valley, splitting open wounds that had festered for nearly 2 decades. What had once been mystery now reeked of something far more sinister. Deliberate concealment. The very ground that had been cleared, searched and blessed by volunteers and law enforcement alike, had held its truth just below the surface, smothered by time and ash. The fire pit, used by countless scouts, hikers, and mourners, was now a crime scene. Crime scene investigators moved slowly, deliberately, their gloved hands brushing aside layers of soot and compacted earth that had once masked horror. The tent had not merely been crushed under rocks or rotted by nature. It had been buried, its structure intact beneath the weight of scorched debris. Melted nylon clung to scorched poles. Sleeping bags fused into the tent floor. Human remains, 4 distinct sets, had been found in tangled, desperate positions, as if the victims had clawed to get out. But only 4. Maddie Kane's body was not among them. The condition of the remains told its own story. Blunt trauma to the skull, fractured forearms, defensive wounds, and most chillingly, the zipper to the tent flap was sealed from the outside. Someone had zipped them in, trapped them, and then built a fire above them, not to warm, to destroy. The press turned ruthless. Satellite trucks flanked the trail entrance like vultures. National outlets caught wind. Headlines screamed, "Mass cover-up in Eden Valley. Youth club tragedy re-examined as homicide." The victims, once etched in memory as lost souls, were now framed in grimmer light, murdered teenagers whose deaths may have been known, even buried twice, once beneath the dirt and once beneath silence. Scrutiny turned toward the Eden Valley Police Department. Public records were pulled, scrutinized, redacted lines highlighted and shared across social media with fury. Why had Chase Greer's past been omitted? Parents were outraged to learn he'd been quietly investigated at a different camp the summer prior for allegedly isolating younger campers and enforcing disciplinary hikes. Though no charges were filed, Eden Valley hired him the following year. The background check noted minor disciplinary concerns. Nothing more. And then came Riley Torres, a name buried in the margins of the original case files. Just another camper then. Now, her voice shook with the weight of memory as she faced Karen Kane across a diner table, knuckles white around her coffee cup. "Maddie didn't want to go," she whispered. "She said Chase got weird after dark. Said he was whispering things into the fire, that they saw something out there, something that wasn't right." And for the first time in 17 years, someone listened. The storm shelter had been long forgotten, buried beneath decades of landslides and silence. Its entrance was warped and half swallowed by roots, nearly indistinguishable from the jagged slope that held it prisoner. But the drone's infrared scan picked up the faintest heat anomaly, a patch of ground that, even after all this time, breathed just slightly warmer than the rest. Beneath layers of moss, stone, and decaying leaves, they pried it open. The door gave with a groan, like something exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Inside, the air was stale but disturbingly intact. Dust choked the corners. The emergency provisions, rusted cans, moldy blankets, had been picked over but preserved with obsessive care. On the far end of the narrow bunker, a battered duffel bag lay open, beside a cracked plastic case containing a child's toothbrush. But it was the bracelet that stopped them cold. Woven green leather, silver charm inscribed M.K. Maddie Kane. And then came the journal. Pages warped by moisture and time, but still legible. No introduction, no dates at first. Just frantic sketches, chaotic loops of ink, crude human figures hunched in the trees, hands like claws, mouths stretched too wide. One page showed a set of teeth, each longer than a human finger. Another was just one line repeated dozens of times in increasingly broken script. "We thought it was an animal, but it talked." Authorities traced the toothbrush's DNA against the sample cataloged from the bodies found under the fire pit. A partial familial match led them to a hospital in Tennessee, where 6 years earlier, a silent young woman had been admitted, malnourished, disoriented, barefoot. The staff called her Jane Doe. She had no name, no identification, no voice. But she had Maddie's eyes. When they told Karen Kane her daughter was alive, the woman collapsed. Not from joy, but from something deeper. Grief, long calcified, cracking under the impossible weight of hope, returned. Maddie had not spoken since the night she disappeared. The silence was not empty. It was sealed. Only after weeks of trauma-informed therapy did fragments begin to leak through. She didn't recount her story in order. Her voice came in shivers and fragments, half-sentences scribbled on a whiteboard, nightmares screamed through locked jaws. She remembered Chase urging them to hike just a bit further, remembered his sudden shift from confident leader to wild-eyed whisperer. She remembered something moving in the trees, too tall for a man, too upright for a beast. It watched us like it knew us, she finally whispered. It didn't blink, it didn't breathe, and it spoke. When asked why she ran, she gave only one answer. Chase locked the tent, said it would take one if we moved. Then the smoke started. I wasn't going to be the one it left behind. And when they asked why she never told anyone, she stared blankly at the wall before her voice cracked into a whisper, like a prayer trapped behind scar tissue. It said if I told, it would come back. Eden Valley stood divided, its silence now louder than any scream. Some clung to the official explanation like a raft in a storm, that Chase Greer, suffering a psychotic break, murdered the teens and buried the evidence beneath layers of ash and fear. It was a neat ending, one that allowed the town to grieve, forgive, and finally move forward. But the facts didn't fit as cleanly as the headlines suggested. When the court order sealing Chase's psychiatric records was finally overturned, the contents disturbed even seasoned officers. The journals, recovered from his family's attic, were a tangle of obsession and dread. Pages filled with phrases like, "They watch through the bark," "The ritual keeps them back," and "Fire starves their hunger." He wrote of entities that spoke in human voices without mouths, and dreams of eyes that opened behind the trees. He wasn't just paranoid, he was terrified. And then there were Maddie's sketches. Deliberate, haunting. The same elongated limbs, the same teeth. But it was the symbol that drew the most attention. A twisted, looping pattern etched around the fire pit, carved deep into the bark of surrounding trees. It wasn't initials or vandalism. It was ritualistic. Forensic analysis confirmed the markings were real, carved with precision into trees over 20 years old. No blade marks. No identifiable tool impressions. Just smooth, unnatural grooves that resisted explanation. No fingerprints. No weathering. Just waiting. Park Ranger Daniel Marsh had seen it before. He recognized the symbol instantly and turned pale. He spoke softly, like each word took effort. "There was a hunter," he said. "Back in '92. Went missing around the eastern ridge. All we found was his camera. The last photo he took, it wasn't clear, not really, but it looked like a person, or something trying to be one, covered in bark, crouched behind his blind, watching." Despite the state's ruling, the case remained open in the minds of many. The forest didn't care about verdicts or resolutions. It only kept its secrets deeper now. Maddie Kane was moved to a private facility near her mother. She spoke more now, measured words, slowly learned again. But she never described what she saw that night in full. Not once. She refused to talk about the voice, about the final scream, about what was left in the firelight when she ran. But every June 14th, without fail, she wakes at midnight. Eyes wide, ears straining, because in the silence of that hour, beyond walls and medicine, she sometimes hears it again. Low, guttural, familiar. The growl, and she still insists, voice steady now. It wasn't Chase who lit the fire. He was trying to keep it out.